Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
We'll just wait a few minutes for more people to join and then we'll get started.
Good morning, Adona. How are you?
Good morning. How are you?
Can't complain.
Good morning, Fran. I love the haircut.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Finally, I feel like a human being. I'm in a little office that has a lot of stuff for our RPAC event here tomorrow, I think. So I'm surrounded by lovely baskets of stuff at the board office.
We'll just wait like 2 more minutes and then we'll start.
Yeah.
It's so nice to see everybody joining because I know the time changed. Sometimes it gets confusing with all the meetings. So I'm happy to see that people did receive my email. I realized the text never went out this morning. I don't know what happened. I just had to mute everybody. So if you need to speak, unmute yourself. All right. So we're just going to get started. I have an office meeting at 10:30, and of course, I want to give you guys the 1 hour. For today's mastermind, obviously, I wanted to let you guys know we don't have the required documents yet. New Jersey Realtor will release their documents August 1st. I know every MLS has their own date. So I will, the leadership will make sure that we keep track of when they're being released. Once they are released, we will definitely notify you guys. The purpose of today's mastermind is I have come across so many situation that has happened recently, and I wanted to let you guys all know. The seller disclosure, the flood risk portion, which is on page 8 of the seller disclosure, has been required since March of 2024. It's a law. Whether you represent the buyer or the seller, it's your responsibility to make sure you have it. If you represented the buyer, even if the seller didn't, the listing agent has not emailed it to you, it is your responsibility to make sure that you have that signed before your client goes under contract, not after post-closing. So you cannot put the blame on the other side if they have not shared it with you, whether or not they're part of the company, our company. So I am going to do some audits on our dot loops because it has come to my attention that if you guys represented the buyer and the seller didn't, the listing agent did not provide it, you guys did not have it signed. I just want to make sure you guys all understand that. August 1st, you need to have the fully executed copy of the seller disclosure. That means the full 8 pages will have to be fully complete. You cannot write does not live here. You can list all the questions unknown except the flood risk. The seller, well, whether it's an estate sale, regular transaction, investor, REO, you have to guide them to go to the flood maps and determine whether or not that property is in a flood zone area. Those questions cannot be checked unknown. But everything else, if they have not lived there, it could be unknown, but it has to be fully completed. It is now going to be required for you guys to upload that document on your MLS from your seller. Please have them sign it during the listing, when you're sending them the listing paperwork, have that signed. Don't do it after the fact. It's so much harder. I'm sure Fran can attest to that. Getting something post-closing or under contract, it's so much harder. The client is going to lose trust in you. They're going to wonder why you did not provide them beforehand. Also on rentals, rentals used to be so easy, not anymore. You have to make sure your client, if you're on the listing side, if it's not exempt, you have to make sure your client, the owner of the property, gets the lead paint inspection. You have to get that done. It's the responsibility of the landlord. The flood risk has to be complete. You have to have that on the MLS. You should not be accepting any applications if the tenant has not signed that form. I just recently had a situation on the sale where the agent did not get the seller disclosure signed. Now the buyer's refusing. They're holding that as blackmail. They're not going to sign it. And that's going to be a huge violation. As you guys know, I've been keeping, and the leadership have been keeping all of you guys informed. You know, the Real Estate Commission is out auditing. We already have 3 audits. They can pick any file they want. They can show up at the office. You could be there working. They could ask you to open your dot loop and check any file they want. They want to make sure that we're in compliance with the state laws. So please make sure that you have those documents. Lead paint obviously has to be fully completed. So I know we've been doing rental compliance. Next week, I will send you guys the registration. We really want to keep track of how many agents are attending so we know where to focus if we need to do an additional training. There's one August 6th, and then there's another one August 27th. We would like you guys to sign up. Of course, we're encouraging you just because of all the new changes. We're going to let you guys know what the law has been changed since March of 2024. There will be a tenant agency agreement as of August 1st. It has not been released. I can't tell you how many pages it will be, what it will look like. Another thing I wanted to bring it up, and I had an agent who called me yesterday, and I was going back and forth with a few of our leadership. And we had also contacted the board and asked NJ Realtors, if you have a rental listing at the moment and you don't have a tenant by August 1st, you should have that conversation with the owner of the listing to let them know that it has changed and get a compensation for yourself. Because if the tenant's agent is able to just get the tenant to pay half a month, how are you going to get paid? So we were going back and forth how that's going to play out. So you want to make sure if you have rental listings, have that conversation now with your owners. Any questions?
Hey, Donna, I have a question on the lead-based inspection. That
Yes.
needs to be done. So I was looking online because I just got a rental and I saw that there's some, it's the responsibility or the township will be doing it as part of their CO. So when exactly are we supposed to be doing this inspection? I guess is my question.
Fran, go ahead.
The township, okay, you're lucky that the township is equipped to do the lead-based paint certification because not all towns are equipped with that. And if they're not equipped, then the seller is still responsible to find someone. So that needs to be done. And it says it in the lease that it is done. So it needs to be done before the property is, I would get it done as soon as possible. I mean, if you think the property is going to rent within 30 days, make arrangements tell them to start, working on that paperwork so that they don't get locked out of having someone come in and do it with vacations, especially in the summer.
Okay. Yeah.
I had a quick question about the lead paint myself. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
I said
Fran.
I've been.
Oh, I'm sorry, Janet, go ahead, finish what you were saying, and then Fran, I'll let you speak next. Go ahead, Janet.
No, Fran, I was just saying thank you for that. I haven't confirmed yet with the township, so I was taking a look at this. But if the townships do it, then the township will do it as part of the CO, and I guess the townships charge anyway, and they will charge the landlord. But if not, it needs to be done before there is occupancy. And your recommendation, if it's 30 days, we do it as soon as possible. Yes,
Yes.
thank you.
I just want to make sure, the lead paint disclosure has to be initialed on each box. There's 2 boxes for each question. They must be check marked. Do not let that go after the fact. If you're representing the buyer, if you choose, let's say you missed a box where you gave the buyer the opportunity to inspect it in 10 days or they waived the right to do one. If you're going through the mortgage process and you're about to close in 2-3 days and the lender goes, hey, your buyer never checked one of the boxes, and you go and check box 10 days, they have the right to inspect it. You can't close for another 10 days. You have to wait out that 10 days. We're going to be very diligent with our dot loop. So we ask you guys to please make sure you have these filled out prior to closing. Do not wait till it's closing time and then you ask your clients to sign it. If the listing, if you're representing the buyer side and the listing does not provide you a document and you have requested from them multiple times, you have to reach out to your manager and the manager will reach out to the broker. It's a state law. Whether or not they tell you they don't comply with this, it's a state law, not a company decision. So if they don't provide it, you have to let us know.
Donna, I've got a question.
Yes.
So last year I had somebody who outright refused to go get the town or whatever lead inspection. So I'm a little worried in case he comes back to me this year. He hasn't done so far. But if you have that same person that completely refuses, what then? Is that on them,
Yeah,
or we
you
just can't take
can't
the
take the
listing?
listing. You cannot
Okay.
take the listing. You gotta release it. We come with the law, guys. Just remember, we're licensed real estate agents. We come with the law. If somebody refuses to get that done, you have to release the listing.
My question was pertaining to the lead paint. Let's say when it comes for rentals, for purchases, it's guaranteed. Like once you get a buyer, you have to, do the CCO. And if the house, I get that. But for rentals though, there's no way to start doing the process of getting the CCO unless you already have a tenant in play when you submit the application. So how would you be able to start it ahead of time? Like, let's say I have a rental listing and my landlord is fine signing and doing everything, but until I get a tenant, I can't submit a CO to my town in particular. They're not going to accept it because I have no one on the other end that's renting it as of yet.
I would check with your town. Okay, so let's just make everything clear. There are two parts to the lead paint. If it's built before 1978, you have the lead-based paint disclosure, which you must have the landlord execute when you take the listing, and do yourself a favor, post it in the required documents on the MLS so that you don't have to go scrambling for it, and make sure the top part is executed properly. Then when it rents, you want the tenant has to complete the bottom part, the tenant's agent has to sign it, and you have to check it to make sure it's executed properly. Now with the town and the CO for the lead-based paint certification, okay, it's not inspection, it's a certification. If the town, check with the town and make sure that they do the certification. Some may allow you to submit the paperwork ahead of time and just provide the tenant's information. Maybe the town doesn't do the certification. So suggest to your landlord at that point that they should hire someone independent, and we have one or two people that we know do it. They would need to hire someone to do it. So you want to circumvent and make sure you're not waiting to the last minute, because if there's something that needs to be done or addressed before the tenant takes occupancy, it could take 2 weeks to address items. And you should go around with them and just say, okay, any chipping, peeling, paint of any kind should be removed outside and inside the property, because when they're inspecting a unit for rental, they inspect outside the property also. I
No,
hope
I
that
understand.
answers your question. I don't know.
Yeah, no. I understand that, Fran. My question was, because initially when you had said it was to try to get the lead paint. Our town does do the certification, which is not an issue. I follow all of that. I was just wanting to stipulate that we can't start the process of CO and the lead paint certification until we actually get a tenant. I do make the landlords fully aware, like, hey, listen, we get a tenant, we have to get the CCO, the lead paint certification, and in my town, also a fire CT, all lock, stock, and barrel, and I told them that up front. Then at that point, if they choose not to want to process that way, then I tell them, all right, great, then I can't take, and you can move on with someone else to do it.
Yeah, I would just make sure there's a big enough window of time between the occupancy date and the signing of the lease date then, so that if something happens and the landlord needs to address it, that they have time to do it with the certification.
Understood. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah, I only brought this up because there seems to be some agencies that are not following the laws, and we keep getting back saying, oh, we don't comply with that, we don't need it, my brokerage doesn't need it, but guess what, it's needed. So if they're not going to send it to you guys, you have to let your manager know so we can reach out. And then, we're still waiting for the new forms, you guys know, and as soon as they're released, we will have another mastermind, which we will go over MLS per MLS, so you guys know what's changed. starting August 1st, so this Thursday, when you guys are hosting an open house, you must have the open house disclosure posted, and you have to have the buyer sign acknowledging that they have seen it. I have shared it with all the managers. I know most of the managers already have meetings this week scheduled. They're going to share it with you guys. So make sure if this weekend you're planning to have an open house, you must disclose it. Please, real estate commission, they can come to your open house. And if you don't have it, that's already, I don't even know what the fine will be like if you don't have that posted on your open house. Buyer agency agreement as well. I know there's supposed to be another shorter version. We don't know if it's going to be 2 page. I know it's not 1 page. They already told us, but we don't know if it's 2 pages, 3 pages, but it is going to be shorter. As soon as that's released, hopefully in the next 2 days, we will share it with all of you guys. There will be a company email sent out to everybody with all the new changes and what you should be expecting. So that email should come out in the next day or 2. We're working on it. So please make sure more than ever, read every single email you receive from RE/MAX Select and your managers. We're all sharing you guys with new required changes that's happening. You guys are the first one to know. So please make sure you read them. Also, there has been so many posts on Facebook from different agents, coaches. You can read them, but please don't take their guidance. It's different company. Some agencies may choose to not follow the state law, but we are. So don't take somebody else's advice. If you are questioning something, reach out to your manager. We're on top of it. We have been taking all these webinars. We've been joining a lot of meetings. So please just take the guidance from your own office manager. And not your friend. Yes.
When you say they've got to sign to say that they've seen that notice, is when they sign in anyway through your open house, is that doing the same thing, or are you talking about some separate signature sheet?
Let me show it to you guys. I'm going to share my screen. Give me 1 second. This is your sign-in sheet. You can use this. So they're putting their name, phone number, email, acknowledge disclosure above, yes or no. Signed buyer representation agreement with an agent, please provide agent info. So you can use this form to collect the data that whoever's walking into your open house.
So question, if I use Open Home Pro, so it's on my tablet. So if I just add a question onto that, which says that they acknowledge the disclosure, then that would satisfy it, correct?
If you have the, let me share the others. Let me share the other one. That this is going to go out to all of you guys.
Yeah, the open house sign-in sheet is optional, like to have the disclosure on it. It's one place or the other, but if you wanted to do both,
So you guys see this, right? You must
Mhm.
have this posted. You can put it on the door next to the sign-in sheet. They have to be able to read it. Don't have an electronic version. You have to have a printout.
All right, but we have a printout, but
they can sign in like through KV Core Open House, which I think is what she's asking.
Correct.
Sign in and have a question saying that they acknowledge reading this form.
Yes.
Correct.
Yep.
All right, so I know there's many versions that you guys may have seen about this. This is the one we're going to use with RE/MAX Select. It will be uploaded on .loop by August 1st. You'll see it. I'm going to also email you guys. Each manager will email you a copy. Save it. You must have this at every open house or broker open. This has to be posted.
We have a question here in Fort Lee.
Yes.
Yes, what if they refuse to sign? Do you escort them out of the house, or do you still show what they can just walk through?
Fran?
So I would just tell them that now, the laws have changed and it's mandatory and we're just doing our job. And, if we're representing the seller, as we're doing our due diligence, right, to represent them the way it needs to be represented by the state of New Jersey, and you must sign. That's it.
Next
And how
question.
about for my seller's safety? They've requested that everybody entering their home gives their information. You know, we always used to use that when people would give us pushback about signing in. It's not for me, it's for my seller who's requested it.
We collect those emails and phone numbers of these people. What can you do with that list?
We have to provide accountability of all the people that walked into somebody's home. We have to account for them. We can't just have a stranger walking in and we don't even know what their first name is.
But his question is, now they do sign in, are we allowed to follow up with them,
Exactly
right? Follow up with them after the open house?
Yeah, if they don't have a buyer agency agreement signed with someone else, remember, if you're going to engage anything real estate related, you must have a buyer agency agreement signed if you want to get compensated. So if
I
you're just,
don't know.
yes.
I'm sorry, you go ahead. You go ahead.
That's-
You finish first.
I just wanted to say that if you're just answering question like, oh, this is 3 bedrooms, 2 bath, fine. However, if you're engaging and trying to make negotiations, you gotta have the buyer agency agreement. Now you're gonna say, how can I convince somebody to sign a 6-month, 3-month? You guys can make it for 1 day. Depending what the shorter version of the buyer agency agreement is, this might answer all of our questions right now. Like, how am I gonna convince somebody to sign a 5-page agreement? So I wish we had it sooner, but we don't. They're still working on it. There has been so many changes back and forth. So hopefully by August 1st, that's when New Jersey Realtor said they're going to release it, and we will share it with all of you guys and we will go over it. I do want to set up a Tuesday mastermind and we're going to go line by line and answer all the questions.
I'm sorry, my background is a little bit noisy, but I have a question. I heard and I was looking for confirmation that people who is hosting the open house can only be represent the seller. They cannot represent buyer. That's what I heard. So I would appreciate if you could confirm that.
So anyone that's hosting the open house, they are a representation of the seller, right? We have the listing. We're under one broker, which is Rob Lazar. So this is why the form is letting the buyers know that we are the seller's agent. However, there is a new agency now called Designated Realtor. So they can, if they're not represented by another agent and they wish to work with you, they get to either pick being a dual agent or a designated realtor.
Yeah, I understand. That's another thing. That is a separate thing. That is in regard to the documentation and also the relationship. What I'm talking about is the open house. In the open house, the agent who is hosting the open house has to represent the seller. They cannot. That means, that's from a perspective is that we cannot hire another person to host our open house. We cannot have our agent to host our open house who is, tentatively want to look for buyers. That's what I'm saying.
So anyone that's hosting your open house besides you, the listing agent, should be a RE/MAX Select agent. You should not be having somebody else that's not a RE/MAX Select hosting your open house.
I understand. I understand.
Secondly,
If whoever that is also from our office. Sometimes, before we have some agent in our office to host our open house. They can look for buyers. But if in the circumstances, if the seller is signing dual agency, or not designate, assuming I'm just giving a scenario. So the other agent from our office who's hosting our open house, they can only represent the seller. They cannot look for the buyer. Is that the case?
That's not, so I think there's a misunderstanding. So I just want you to listen until I tell you what the differences is, and then you can let me know if that answered your question. Rob Lazar is our broker of record. Any listing, we are sponsored by Rob Lazar's license. Any listing that you guys have belongs to Rob Lazar. So that means we technically are all responsible to the seller. If somebody's doing, let's say, Sue, you have a listing and I come from Morristown and do your open house, I represent your seller. That's why there's this form. You have to disclose it to the buyer that we are representing the seller. If they choose to still work with you because they like what you had offered, your value, they can sign a dual agency agreement or a designated agency. So that means you can be a designated agent now, meaning that whatever that buyer shares with you, you will not have to share with the seller. That means if you're not the listing agent, right? You can be a designated agent. So Sue, if you had your listing and me, Idona from Morristown, I'm hosting your open house and a buyer says, hey, I want you to represent me, but I want to make sure it's a designated, so you don't share any information I share with you to the seller, that could happen. So that means whatever they share, it's confidential between me and the buyer.
That's very clear. Yeah, that's very clear. What I'm trying to say is, can we have both a dual agency and designated agency agreement signed, or just either one?
Either one. Technically, we
So
are
if
dual
it,
agents, right?
So, I mean, technically, yeah, that's a really, I mean, very clear. I mean, that all the listing belongs to the office. That's very clear. It's not what we are referring here. So what I'm trying to say is, say, for example, the seller is say, okay, I want you, Adonna, only be a designated agent as a seller agent. That's it. No dual agent. So in that sense, when you have your listing, the open house, you want an agent to represent you to host the open house. So that agent is also representing the seller. They cannot represent the buyer because we are the designated agents. Is that the case? That's what I'm trying to say.
So I will double check that, but I think it's two different things, right? So if you have the listing and you're a designated agent, me as the broker, I can pick somebody else from the company to host your open house, and they will be a designated realtor that they will not have any responsibility to the seller, but just to the buyer.
Adona,
Yeah.
Yes.
at the meeting
Yeah.
yesterday, there was basically said that you could now collect the commission from both sides, which you could if you were designated. But she didn't seem to be sure when somebody asked her if that was true for disclosed dual agency. Do you know the answer to that one?
So for both dual agency as well as designated agency, you can collect from both parties. For example, if we're a dual agent and let's just say, again, no price fixing, I'm just throwing an example for this purpose. If you have a buyer agency agreement for 2.5 and the seller's offering 2%, you can collect, Jackie Haynes, like 2% from the seller, and now you can collect 0.5 from your buyer. Before it was not possible, now it is. Does that answer your question?
Does for me. Thank you, Adona.
You're welcome. I have
just a quick question. Sorry.
Yes.
So this is hi. So the scenario is all assuming that the seller is not going to pay out a buyer's commission, correct? Like the scenarios we're talking about. Because in the event that the seller is willing to pay out a buyer's commission, it's kind of business as usual. Sign a dual agency, and then we're okay, or no?
So I'm not sure I understand your question, as far as like the
So
commission
like
you can collect from both sides?
So like right now, like, you know, we sign, you know, we take a listing, we get the dual agency signed by the seller. They're agreeing to pay out, I don't know, let's just say 5% for argument's sake. We go through, we end up having a buyer that we can represent. We have them sign the buyer's agreement, but we know that the seller's paying out both sides. Like, you know, I listen, there's gonna be a case by case, I'm sure, as we move forward. But I'm saying, so
You still need to have a buyer agency agreement, and even if the
Right.
seller's offering compensation, I guess the scenario that we were discussing is, can you collect from both the buyer and the seller? Meaning, if you had a buyer agency agreement for 2.5 and the seller is saying, I'm only going to pay the buyer agent 2%, then how are you going to get the 0.5? Before, that was not legal. Like, we could not collect from the buyer. Now you can.
Right, now it gets made up by the buyer. Got it. The difference.
Right. So that's the difference. Now, what happens if it's the other way around? You have a buyer agency agreement for 2 and the seller's offering 2.5. By law, we cannot collect more than what's on the agency agreement.
Right,
Now,
you can't grab the extra half.
right. So, however, on the settlement, and all the webinars that we've been in the meetings, they're not emphasizing, you probably, all the recordings you'll watch, they kind of delete that portion. You can amend your buyer agency agreement. So when you first sign the agreement, you can let your client know that we can amend this buyer agency agreement depending on the property we find. So if you have a buyer agency agreement for 2 and you're looking at properties and it's 2.5, if you're submitting an offer, amend your agreement. That has not been changed. You know, they didn't make it illegal, so I'm okay if you guys do that. It'll be easier if it's the other way around, but that's what we have been told by Barry Goodman from New Jersey Realtors, and all the webinars. A lot of you were on the webinar yesterday, so that's being discussed. You know,
So you can amend it to the 2.5. You're saying.
Right.
Got it. Okay, great. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Sorry,
yes.
Sorry, I'm not trying to drag on that question. I mean, I understand. It seems, I mean, for the designated agreement, if that is signed, and there seems in the webinar somebody was saying that if the broker is representing the seller, so the buyer has to be chosen by another brokerage, not the same brokerage. That's what I heard. I mean, that is the meaning of a designation, right? I mean, because if there is another agent from the same office representing the buyer, that means the broker is also dual agent. It's not designated. That's right. Is that correct? So if the designated agreement is signed, meaning that the broker is only representing the seller, not if the buyer representation comes in, it has to be from other broker, not the same broker. That's what I heard.
So that's why, like in the beginning, I said the advice that you guys hear, if it's not coming from your manager or Rob Lazar, please don't take that advice, because everybody's gonna throw their own version.
No, that's from the webinar, not from the other, from any other.
So
that's from the webinar.
If you have a listing, so there's a misunderstanding. I'm going to try and explain this to you, and we're going to take this offline so that we can move on, because I have another 10 minutes before I have to let you guys go. If you have the listing, Sue, and you're a seller, first of all, guys, make it easy for you. If you're not sure of the designated agency, you've all been so comfortable with the dual agency. The designation agency is new. And that only applies if your seller says, I do not want you to represent the buyer. I only want you to represent me. In that case, you have to go to your manager, and the manager can designate another agent to represent the buyer. The listing is still ours. So if they don't want you to represent the buyer, you can have somebody else from RE/MAX Select hosting your open house, because Rob Lazar is still the person at the top, right? So we can designate another agent to whoever walks in, they can represent the buyer.
So the broker is still the dual agent in that sense, according to what you said. It's not what the seller is.
It's still, right. I don't want to talk
it's
about
not that. I don't want to, but I just want to let you know that in that sense, in the webinar, it is clear that one of the panel was saying that no, you have to the buy agent in that sense. If that is the designated agency assigned, that means the broker cannot have the other agent in their office to represent them.
Yeah, so I'll call you after my meetings today just so we can go over it, but you don't, if the seller says they don't want you to represent the buyer, and you host an open house and you have somebody else hosting your open house, they can sign the designated realtor. That means they're not representing the seller, but they can represent the buyer, because at that point it's just creating another layer to separate between being a dual and a designated agent. That means that whatever the buyer share with the open house host, they don't have to disclose it to you. But we'll take that offline later, and I'll give you a call.
I just have one other question about that, sorry.
Yes.
Okay, so in the past, right, when things, sometimes dual agency can be kind of tricky when you're representing both the buyer and the seller. So
Okay.
oftentimes we try to get a neutral party involved. Now we're gonna call them the designated realtor, right? So now when it comes to commission, let's say you're the listing agent, you're pretty much the procuring clause of selling the house because you were showing them, but the seller obviously does not want you to represent, and then the broker signs someone to represent the seller. Now, with the listing agent, is there any agreement where they can make an agreement to get maybe partial, I'm just trying to play devil's advocate, but part of that buyer's commission?
Why do you make this so difficult, Fran?
But you know, this happens, you know, even like prior, right? We did it, we did, like, you know, sometimes the broker has stepped in to represent the buyer. So at least the buyer feels like they had some kind of representation, fully knowing that the listing agent was sometimes getting most or, you know, most or all of the buyer side, you know, in-house, like.
So you,
Just
so
saying.
just to clarify, so you, if you have the
Someone might ask that
listing,
question later on, yeah.
right, so you have the listing, you're hosting your own open house, but you have a designated agency with the seller, and a buyer walks in and they want you to represent them, which you can, and then a manager would have to designate another agent. You're saying, can I collect like a referral, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Good question. I'm gonna write that down. I don't want to answer. One meeting I've been to, they said no, but I will, because at that point then you are collecting, but I will double check for you guys, and next Tuesday I will make sure to have an answer. There's gonna be so many questions that we're not gonna know the answer. You guys know NewJerseyRealtors.com/CPEA. I'm gonna write it on the chat. This is gonna be your new best friend moving forward. There is all the new updates will be here. Also, New Jersey Realtor, there is a legal library. I'm sorry, I misspelled that, so I'm just gonna rewrite it. You guys can ask your questions there, and then the attorneys will respond, but they've been pretty quick, within 24 to 48 hours. So if you guys have a question that has not been answered, you can go there and ask your question. A lot of questions have already been answered, so you guys feel more than welcome to go and check it out. You might learn more. And then, you know, I have a calendar from now to end of August, which I will share with your managers. And even though those are designed for my own offices, it's going to be on Zoom. I wanted to leave it open for all of you guys. So whoever wants to join, it's going to be a lot of just asking questions and us finding the answer. So I will share that with later today. Feel free to join. So yes, there's going to be a lot of meetings. Yes, there's a lot of trainings. I hope you guys are making the time and effort to join these new MLS webinars board. They've been a lot of free CE classes. There was one is scheduled tomorrow, next week from NCJAR, and I know Greater Board of Realtors is also doing a lot. Please register, take advantage. You guys want to be expert by the end of this. There's so many tools that's available for all of you guys, and I hope you guys take the opportunity and take them. It's a lot, and we're all doing them, you know. Yesterday I was in two Zoom meetings at once, because unfortunate, you know, every MLS has their own trainings and webinars and what they're doing. I just highly, before I end this, because I have an office meeting, please, if you have, I'm just going to repeat it for the ones that came late. If you currently have a rental listing that's active, go and have that conversation with your owners to make sure you get them to pay your side of the commission. Because starting August 1st, the tenants, the agent for the tenant will probably just get an agreement from their tenant to pay half a month, and then you're not going to get paid. So please make sure you have those conversations now. This question was raised by so many. One of them happened to be our agent yesterday, and I'm like, that's a good question. What's going to happen? Because they keep telling us your listing agreements can stay as is. The only thing that's going to be removed is the compensation from MLS. Well, the listing agent agreement guarantees you payment, but for rentals, we always charge the tenant. So or most of the time. So if you have that, please make sure you have those conversations. Don't wait till August 1st. Start doing that now. The other one was the seller disclosure. Again, I keep repeating myself, but I've had at least 5 conversations in the last day just about it. Do not wait till post-closing to get that signed. Make sure the seller disclosure, flood risk portion had to be signed by the seller since March 2024. It's not new, it's required. The listing agent was not required to have it on MLS. So if they did not have it, it's still your job to go and request it from them and make sure it was acknowledged by your buyer. Same thing on the rental side. It's been required since March 2024. Even if the other side said they don't comply, it's a law. You have to have it. Do not have your client go under contract but on a transaction without these proper documentations. Any questions?
On the seller disclosure, only flood required or the whole?
The whole thing will be August 1st, starting August
As
1st.
from March,
Let's say the build, apartment building, a condo building, there is no flood whatsoever. So that landlord required to give seller disclosure?
for the rental, it's the flood risk notice. Whether or not it's not in the flood, they have to answer the question. There's 3 questions. 2 of them is yes or no. It cannot be unknown. So that means the first 2 questions, they have to go on the flood maps and determine if it's on the flood zone or not. The third one can be yes, no, or unknown. Whether or not it's a condo, it has to be, it's required. It has to be uploaded on your MLS. Till July 31st, you didn't have to upload it on MLS, but now it's a law. So starting August 1st, lead paint, flood risk for a rental or seller disclosure for a sale has to be on the MLS starting August 1st. If you have an active listing now and you only had them sign the flood risk portion as of August 1st, you better have that fully completed if it's still active.
What happens if it's a for sale by owner?
Doesn't matter, they have to. If you represent the buyer, you come with the law, they have to get that done.
Right.
Idona, on the flood risk form, there's a qualifier for condominiums. Can someone explain to me what that is or where I can find that information? Because I've searched, I have no idea what the qualifier is. Excuse my ignorance.
Say that again for a rental
On
condo?
the flood risk form, there's a section that says qualifier, and it says in parentheses, it's, I guess, for condominiums. So we have to check off the qualifier. I don't know what that is. Does anyone know what that is?
We're just talking about it. It might be on the tax report.
It's on the tax report.
I looked on the tax and I looked
Yeah,
at,
they don't all have a qualifier number, but some of them do. So if you check, and it's only applicable to like a condo. So if you check and there's a number there and it's like C0086 or something like that. Yeah. If there's something there, you plonk it in, and if there isn't, don't bother. That's what I do.
all right, so it's labeled as a qualifier on the tax record. Okay, I'll take a look. I looked at the flood map. I didn't see anything there.
Janet, if you have RPR, if you have the app, I'll call you after. You can put the address and go scroll at the bottom where the tax records are. You'll be able to see it there too. It gives you the block lot, and if it does have a qualifier, it'll like show up there too. That's another way you can do it.
Okay, I'll look back on RPR. I looked at both. I didn't see qualifier anywhere. So, and this is a condominium, so I didn't know what the heck to put in there. But thank you all.
You're welcome. All right, guys, I'm gonna wrap. Yes.
Before you go, you were talking about uploading the documents now on the MLS. NJ MLS is easy to upload documents. I have been trying to upload the lead and stuff like that on Garden State. They don't have any place for that. It stays on the thing that I've already updated. It doesn't give me an option for anything else. I don't know how people get their lead and stuff like that on Garden State.
So there is an email when it gives you like the MLS ID, and there's an email address. You can email them the document and they upload it for you.
Yeah, I have to show it to you because it doesn't work for me.
So we'll definitely talk. I'll be in Morristown tomorrow, so we can definitely
Audrey?
go over that.
Audrey, it was playing up a couple of days ago because it played up for me too, but normally it's fine. You can either fax it or you can email it. But I know like 2 days ago, they had some problem with it because it didn't work for me then either. So it might just be when you looked.
Okay, good. Thanks.
All right, so I'm going to send this recording to all of you guys. I'll share it with the if you're not in my office, then your manager will share the video with you guys later I'm gonna say tonight because I have a few meetings and I have to wait till this is fully uploaded to our cloud. In addition, I'm going to send an invitation for you guys to sign up for the flood I'm sorry, not the flood, the rental compliance, which is next Tuesday. And then there's another one for August 27th. So I hope you guys join one of them. If you have already joined one that we had last month, then you're fine. You don't have to do it again unless you want to learn more, or if you want a refreshment, you can. And then I am going, depending when the documents are released, I will be scheduling random Zoom meetings. You guys are free. If you want to join, you can. If you don't, they'll always be recorded. And like I said, we're going to send out an email, company-wide email to all of you. We have some great new changes we made, and it's going to be so much easier for you guys to get all these recordings. So it's going to be all in one spot. So if you miss one, you can always go. But I encourage you to join the live version because then you are able to ask the questions and it's easier. So if you guys don't have any other questions, I'm going to let you guys go. And I will see you guys on Friday's Mastermind at 9:30 and then next Tuesday at 10. No questions? Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Yeah.